Why does he look like this? Oh. I, Boes, along with a few other creators, were very lucky to be invited to Firaxis Studios in beautiful Maryland, United States of America, brother. Now, while this video isn't paid, they did fly me out and they did lodge me themselves, so I want to give a big thank you to Firaxis as well as 2K for inviting me and hosting me so that I can play the one, the only Civilization 7. Once again, seriously, thank you 2K, thank you Firaxis. I honestly never thought I'd be given this opportunity, so I cannot say thank you enough. But you did hear that right. I played Civilization 7. Sid Meier's Civilization 7 even. There is going to be a lot I'm going to discuss in this video. It's going to be going even more in depth than the gameplay trailer that Firaxis revealed today. I'll be talking about all the stuff that is brand new to the game. I'll also be talking about what's good, what is bad, or at least what I found mid that we don't really know until we play it, as well as the ugly parts of Civ 7. Because there's so much to talk about, here are some timestamps. You can pause here or you can hop around. I'll also have the timestamps in the videos itself, so that way you can hear about the different portions of the game so that you can skip around. I'm not going to hold you all any longer. Let's just jump right into it. I cannot believe I'm actually talking about Civilization 7 and I'm talking about it early. There is a bunch to talk about here. There are a lot of changes to the game. There's a lot of it that kind of stays the same. It is at its core a Civilization game, but there are a lot of brand new mechanics that may look familiar because of other games, or if you have not played any other 4X game aside from Civ, they may look brand new to you. First and foremost, the game is coming out for all platforms, not just for PC release. I do believe that Firaxis saw how successful Civ was Civ 6 was for the consoles. And let me tell you, I know most people who watch Civ content generally plays on PC. After talking with the devs, console players are... Civ 6 on console is way more popular than you think, like a legitimate portion of the Civ player base. So it definitely makes a lot of sense that they're wanting to release it on all the platforms. That includes, Xbox Series X, like Xbox One, PS4, PS5, Nintendo Switch, etc. So they're going all out on it, making sure that the game is going to be ready for all of those, because that is a pretty ambitious list for a release date for a game. So I'm fairly confident that they'll do it. It is pretty ambitious, but let's hope that they do, because like I said, there were a lot of console players who played 6. But to move away from that, talk about the main changes in Civilization 7. And the first one, as everyone is expecting, is going to be the leaders and the civilization section of Civ 7. Just like in previous games, you can choose the leaders of the games, but there is something different that is added to 7 in that you can change the cultures of the game. Now, the first ones that were shown to us, there were only 4 leaders that we were able to play during the gameplay. There was Amina, we have Ashoka as well, we have Augustus, as well as Hatshepsut of Egypt. Now, we were only able to play these 4 leaders, and I didn't switch around the leaders and the civilizations, but what you can do that is new to Civ 7, brand new to Civ 7, is you can choose the different type of culture that you are playing with as the leader. So in this, I just played Hatshepsut of Egypt. You can change it to Hatshepsut of Aksum. You can also change it to Hatshepsut of Rome. You can play Hatshepsut of, and further, like, say, for example, if America was in it, it could be Hatshepsut of America, and so on and so forth. The thing here is that you also get all of the abilities from all of the different cultures. If you've ever played the Blitz mod in Civilization 6, that mod allows you to mix and match culture abilities, units, leaders, etc. So in this instance, if you played as Hatshepsut, you would still get her specific leader abilities, but you also would be able to get the abilities of, like, say, if you're playing Aksum, the Do, which is a unique naval unit, the Tonqua, which is a specific trade ship to that culture. But if you played Egypt of if you played Hatcheps of Egypt, you would get +1 production on navigable rivers, which you read that right. We'll get into that later. There are navigable rivers in Civ 7, as well as +30% production towards constructing the pyramids, because that is unique to Egypt. You also get Egyptian-specific units, a specific Egyptian building that does change, like I said, through each different culture. So one of the biggest things that I am very, very, very much looking forward to is figuring out how can I make the most busted Civ of all time. How can that ends up happening pretty crazily with Egypt later on, that I'll get into once we get into the mechanics of policies later on. This is something that I'll decide and we'll talk about in the good, the bad, and the ugly section, but this is a brand new section of Civ that is brand new section that is new to Civ. It is not new to other 4X games. For example, Humankind does this. Problem is, Humankind, I feel like, at least to me, did it badly because, one, the characters of the games were so inhuman that it didn't really matter, and two, the ages moved so fast that it did not matter what Civ you chose. By the time you were able to utilize the benefits of that Civ, the age was over and you could not use that Civ anymore. Which brings us to the next section of the new mechanics, and that is the ages section. There are 3 ages in Civilization 7. There is the Antiquity, the Exploration Age, and the Modern Age. The Antiquity is the first one. Think of it as, to put it into Civ 6 terms, it is the ancient classical into the medieval era. The Exploration Age is the beginning of the medieval era through right around the end of the industrial era, and the modern era is the rest of the game, so from end of industrial into the future era. We only got to play the Antiquity Age. I finished the Antiquity Age, I finished the end of it, but unfortunately for us, it didn't roll over into the next age, as this was only a playable demo of the game. So we weren't able to see what happens into the next age, like what it looks like when you switch around cultures and things along those lines. Each age does have a unique gameplay to it. There are specific things that happen in that age that only happen in that age, and do not happen in the next age. I didn't really get that much into it, so your guess is kind of as good as mine. Some of them do include specific techs and buildings, but generally, as long as you unlocked them, they do carry over as a legacy Civ. So say, for example, you had units that were specific to Egyptian culture in the Antiquity era, and you moved into the Exploration era, and you chose a different culture. As long as you unlocked those units in this example, you would still get those previous Egyptian units. They wouldn't change to whatever culture. Say, for example, you chose Rome as the next culture. You played Hatshepsut of Rome. They wouldn't just automatically upgrade to those new ones. You would still have those previous Egyptian units and buildings, so on and so forth. There are also bonuses that you get per choosing, I guess is another thing to go back to. The bonuses that you get from choosing your leader / culture, those carry over into the next age, so you'll get legacy abilities. We didn't get too much into it just because of how limited time we had to play the game. So, but there are some abilities that you get in this era, in the first era, that will carry over into the next era. It's not just a specific era by era thing. The next big change that we can talk about is the actual victory conditions of the game. There are 4 of them. There are science, culture, military, and economic, I guess, victory conditions, if you wanted to call them. They are chosen through legacy paths. The way that the game plays, at least what was explained to us, is that it's not necessarily like a score victory. It kind of is, so it's kind of similar to Humankind in that aspect. But you choose a legacy path to win that victory, whether it be science, obviously going to space, whether it be culture, being the most culturally relevant person in the entire civilization, whether it's through military, aka domination, and the new one, which is economic, which I'll be honest, during the gameplay, I probably should have chosen that. I didn't. There are different milestones that you gain through each of these victory conditions, and at the end it's kind of like hard to explain how it works. What you do is you set a legacy path in the beginning of the game, whether you want to win the victory condition through science, culture, or whatever, and then an advisor will pop up and give you objectives. So for example, I chose culture when I was playing Egypt, and my cultural objectives were to build X amount of wonders. The first one was I needed to build 1 wonder, and then I got a legacy milestone. Because we didn't go to the next age, I can't tell you how it carries over. But from what I remember and from what they were telling us is that at the end of the game, you choose your victory, you choose how you're going to win, whether it's through one of those 4 victory paths, and then depending on, you know, the milestones you got and etc., that's what you go for in the final age. How it works, we don't know yet. We're not going to know. One of the next big changes that has been added to Civilization are, I guess you can kind of call them grand strategy mechanics. There are narrative events into Civilization 7, as well as new currency, as well as upgrading leader abilities. The first one, like I said, narrative events. You will get pop-ups from where they're going over. I believe they're called cairns now, but basically the goodie huts that are in all previous Civilization games, where you can choose you get an option of, for example, in this one, it says soldiers have tracked a horde of bandits to their stolen treasure. Debts must be repaid. Offer repentance through labor, which means you get plus 10 production and 50 gold to your capital, or redistribute their valuables, which gives you plus 75 happiness to that city. So you get to choose like these narrative events. This also happens in other instances, whether it is random narrative events. That's a new feature to Civilization 7. Another one that is, I guess, also technically a grand strategy aspect is a new currency in the game called influence. Now, influence is exactly as it sounds. It's a currency that you use to spread influence to other civilizations. We'll get into how I feel on it later on, but this is what it is. It is used during diplomacy. You use your influence, which builds up via, just like all other influence, like gold, culture, science, etc., and you spend it on different interactions with civs, whether it is to denounce them, whether it is to have an open border treaty, whether it's to reconcile after being denounced. You use your influence to spend on other civs to be diplomatic with them. Another instance, too, that is also kind of grand strategy-like is that now your leader has abilities that are upgraded throughout the age based on different things that you do. It is kind of similar to policy cards. Like it's really weird to explain. It was nice playing with it. I did like playing with it, but sorry, they're not called abilities. I apologize. Leader attributes. I did like playing with it, but it definitely felt a little weird, as you get those attributes depending on the type of victory condition, more or less, that you're going for. Are you going to be more of a cultural leader? Are you going to be a diplomatic leader? Are you going to be an economic leader, militaristic, expansionist, scientific, etc.? And what you get from those abilities are bonuses that, like I said, kind of similar to policy cards in Civ. For example, culture, there is a leader ability where you gain plus 10% production towards constructing wonders. This kind of harkens back to what I was stating about how you can build absolutely busted civs, because if you remember, Egypt has an ability already towards wonders in cities. You get 15% production towards constructing wonders in cities that have navigable rivers, plus you gain that extra ability from the leader attribute of 10% production towards constructing wonders. Then you also add on top of the policy card that you get into from unlocking civics of extra production towards wonders. And it got to a point where I was building wonders in about 4 or 5 turns near the end of the age, and I think I had 9 wonders or 10 wonders built. It can turn into some pretty crazy broken civs if you allow it to be. Carl did talk to us and say that there will be some balancing done. I do believe Spiffing Brit literally broke the game and made some crazy like free gold mechanic with Egypt, and Carl's like, yeah, we're already fixing that. So it will be adjusted. Another big change that has happened in Civ 7 is the independent powers are completely different now. You can treat them as if they are truly independent. They are city-states like they were in previous games, but they have a lot more options now. You use your influence to influence them, to befriend the city-state. That influence lasts for a specific amount of time, and then you can add support to that city-state by also spending influence as a currency, to whether it be to help make them your suzerain or to turn them into your vassal, or hopefully at some point into the game, which you can do. I didn't do it, but you can turn that city-state or that independent peoples into your own empire. So have that city join your empire, and that just turns into a new settlement. If you don't do those things, you can also treat them kind of like how you can with barb clans in Civilization 6, where you can levy units, even if you're, or you can use those units to incite those units to attack a nearby civilization. So the way that we were talking about it with the devs is that barb clans in Civ 6 was kind of a test run to how this would work in Civ 7, and it worked out very, very well in Civ 6. As you know, if you watch my content, you know that I think that barb clans should just be hard baked into the game as Civ 6. I don't even consider it as an extra game mode like Secret Societies. So it's nice to see them moving into that direction with the independent powers. There is also another new section added to the game. Barbarians aren't really a thing anymore, but there is a new thing called crises. And these crises are... like I said, we'll get into how I feel about them later on. But basically, it is kind of a government thing of the game where once crises happen, I'll be honest, I didn't understand how they happened, whether it was if you were unhappy for a specific amount of time. I don't know what the trigger was for that, but a crisis will begin and you'll have to start utilizing crisis policy cards, and you have to select them, and they are negative attributes to your empire. You'll see here there are some of them that are like -1 happiness in all cities for each commander rank, or you assign a policy card that's -5 gold for each imported resource. This is basically a replacement for barbarians, and what can actually happen is once it gets to the crisis intensifies and the crisis culminates, barbarian independent powers start spawning around the map, and they are very difficult to deal with. They're not raging barbarian levels. Let me get that straight. They're not raging barbarian levels where all they do is just send all of their units to your cities and flood your units over and over to make it annoying. But it does make you kind of have to sit there and be like, all right, there's a crisis happening. I have to have at least some units on the map to defend myself from these crises or to kill these independent barbarian powers. And I did like that. I actually really did like that. It made it seem like if you watch me play Civ, you know that I'm a very, very greedy player. And if I don't have to build a unit, or if I can get away with not building something, I will. So I can, beeline to whatever I'm trying to do. This kind of, not necessarily took that away, but it gave you consequences for doing so. In Civ 6, if I'm doing a crazy weird culture victory where I'm only building wonders, like I do with China, or if I'm doing a weird, tile improvement only culture victory, I don't build military. I don't build all these extra things that I don't need if I don't have to, because I'm trying to rush, a wonder, or I'm trying to rush a golden age so I can get monumentality, things along those lines. This kind of gives you some consequences of doing that. If you are trying to play as pacifist as possible, and you don't have any army to defend yourself, and you are just trying to sneak through the culture victory by doing all these things, this kind of gives you a check. Be like, hey, there's a crisis happening, and this is, if you weren't prepared for it, or if you weren't even thinking about it happening, this is, now you gotta stop what you're doing and do this. There are probably some people aren't gonna like it. I think the majority of people will prefer this over just straight barbarians like there were in previous Civ games. The last big change is going to be talking about the army commander. This is a brand new part of the game where it replaces both the great general aspect of the previous games as well as the army upgrades of the previous games, as that now all goes through the army commander. Instead of promoting your units when they gain a specific amount of XP from battles, your army commander does that now. So in order for you to gain, for example, archers to have +2 range instead of +1, you have to upgrade your army commander through the experience it gains through battle and go down through one of these specific trees. There's Bastion, Assault, Logistics, Maneuver, and Leadership. When I played, I went down through the Assault. That gave all of my units surrounding my commander plus, I think it was 3 combat strength for the first one, and then you can choose whether it's like range units gain +1 extra range when they're within 1 tile of an army commander, or extra defenses within 1 tile of an army commander. That depends on what tree you go down. But that all goes to the army commander now. Units themselves do not promote. They are treated as it was described to us, they are now kind of treated as cannon fodder, if you will, as you kind of want them to be. You know, I mean, that's how, when you think of armies in the past, for example, right, it is mostly about all the meat shield of units that you have around you, and the commanders, the generals, you know, telling them what to do. And that is kind of the idea that you have here with the army commanders, is that it all goes through them now. They are your most important unit, and I have a feeling a lot of multiplayer is going to come down to who can snipe the commanders first before, you know, taking on the rest of the field. And that also includes a new ability with the army commander, and that is I don't remember what the actual ability was called, but it allows you to take all of your, I think it's called just gather. Yeah, gather all of your adjacent land units to form up on the army commander into one unit tile, and then you can move your army commander around the map, and all of those units that were gathered into you stay and move with you, which is kind of a nice thing because it allows you to not have to micromanage 30 units across the map when you're trying to go to war with someone. You can get like 4 or 5 army commanders, have all of them gather all of those units together, send those 4 or 5 army commanders across the map, and then once you get to the spot where you want to attack and move all your units, you can unload them all in front of your army commander or wherever you decide to, and they will unload like so, and that's how you can start your fights. This is a very good change. I really, 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 really enjoyed playing with this. I cannot think of another person who did not enjoy playing with this. I think this was, out of all the new changes into mechanics in the game, I think we all really enjoyed this, because not only is there the micromanagement aspect to it, there are also other buttons on the army commander, and some of those buttons are every single ranged unit that are, like, you can order every single ranged unit that is within one tile of the army commander to all attack one specific thing by just clicking one button. Or there's a button that makes you fortify every single unit around the army commander and build a fortification. There's also ones for making them all like move in defensive maneuvers. There's a lot of really cool things that the army commander adds to this game that I thought was just really, really ingenious and really, really good. And I enjoyed it. It's probably one of the best things that I've played about this, or that I remember about the game, that sticks out in my memory as being a fantastic change and just a great quality of life and play change. Like, at first you look at it and you're like, this is kind of weird. I miss my great generals. I miss having those super beefed up units. But take that thinking and just move it over to a commander. You have a super beefed up commander that has tons of promotions, and he's leading your army around the map, and you're just using him as the main focal point of the army and supplementing his army, making sure your units don't die. It's really good. I cannot emphasize enough how good that change is. And I'm trying to think of what else. There is a lot. So I'm just going to start going through all the different mechanics that are in the game that are not those just key main changes. Yes, a lot of these are going to be new changes that are pretty big, but I think those are just like the big, like, oh, what is new in Civ 6? You know, kind of like how Civ 5 what is new in Civ 7? Kind of like how, you know, when Civ 6 came out, like districts were the new big thing. Or, you know, Civ 5 came out, hexes and non-stackable units were the new big thing. So we're going to go through a lot of these mechanics now that are part of Civilization 7. And then once we get through all of this, I'm going to talk about the good part of the game, the bad, or at least the unknown part of the game, and the ugly part of the game. One of the big ones that it's big is that there are no more builders, actually. 0 builders. Things that you would use builders for, such as building tile improvements, is now done by the city. Whenever you go to claim a tile or a border tile, you are also building that improvement on it regardless of tech or whatever, so you don't have to necessarily unlock a tech to build a pasture on a cattle resource. That tile improvement gets built automatically, and then you gain extra bonuses based off of the tech you unlocked. For example, if you unlock animal husbandry, that's when you'll get the extra food and production from that tile improvement instead of just getting it whenever you get it. That also means that you cannot chop. There is no chopping in Civ 7. There is no chopping out woods to get wonders faster. There is no chopping out units to get units faster. That entire mechanic is completely gone. You can still claim tiles by gold buying them, but the only time that you actually claim a tile is when your city borders grow, and that does not grow naturally via culture. It is based off of actual growth. and that's when you get to build a brand new tile improvement. You can, like I said, you can build tile improvements, and you can use gold to buy the tiles, but it is no longer by a builder. That builder as a mechanic, as a unit, is completely gone. Happiness as a mechanic is now back, so amenities are gone. Happiness, just like in previous Civilization games, is back. So it's exactly how you think it works. Gain extra happiness, your cities flourish. You have negative happiness, you gain negative modifier penalties to production, gold, growth, etc. That also includes, I believe they were called celebrations in Civ 7. It is the same mechanic as is We Love the King Day in Civilization 5, where that city requires a specific resource. And once they get that resource, in Civ 5, you gained a golden age, or that city had extra yields. The celebration in Civilization 7 is similar to how the golden age worked in Civ 5, where, you had excess happiness for a specific amount of time. And the way it's worked in Civ 7 is you gain a narrative event, and you get to choose a modifier that best fits your empire. So, for example, I was playing Egypt. When I got a celebration day, there was a mechanic that you can, for 10 turns, gain additional production percent modifiers to wonders. And as you could see, I kept stacking that on top of Egypt's extra abilities of wonder production, and that's how I was able to build wonders so fast as Egypt, because of the celebration that we got from the excess happiness. Districts are still a thing, but they are not the way that you think they work. Or they don't work the way that you think they work. They're not kind of how they were in Civilization 6. There are two types of districts, the way they explained it to us. There's a rural district and a urban district. The rural district is, as stated earlier, or talked about earlier, claiming tiles by building tile improvements on them. So, claiming a tile that has a rice field on it and building a tile improvement or rice field that is a rural district. And then an urban district is overriding those tiles with buildings that are placed down on top of them. So it is a mixture between Civilization 5 and Civilization 6, where the buildings, you basically only build buildings in the game, but those buildings are placed on tiles instead of inside of your city. And because of that, yes, adjacencies are still there, and yes, you can make some crazy combinations with buildings to get crazy adjacencies. There are multiple types of buildings per, I guess you would call it a yield. So you can choose between, building a library versus building, there was a different type of building, I don't remember what it was, but there are multiple different types of buildings per, I guess, yield or victory condition that you can build on those tiles. And then you can get some crazy adjacency bonuses, as the bonuses are based off of the buildings and not just the district themselves. So you can, in fact, get a tile that has like 4 food, 3 production, 9 science, and 2 gold on it, based off of the just straight buildings that you built on that tile. And that actually ties in perfectly to the next portion of mechanics. There is no more city management until you get to specialists. If you were like me and you were a hyper-perfectionist in Civilization 6, one of the biggest things and most fun things for you was citizen management, trying to milk out every single yield that you can, whether it be, I need production right now, so you assign all of your citizens to production, whether you need your city to grow, so you assign them to all grow, or you make it all balanced. It's all automatic now. I don't know how I feel about it yet. We'll talk about it more once we get into the good, the bad, the ugly. But basically, every single tile improvement that you build into the city gets worked automatically as yields added to your city, so you don't have to worry about spending your citizens on specific tiles to get those resources. Whatever you build a tile improvement, that gets added to your city. So you're going to get every single food production, growth, etc. that you build in your city, no matter what. The choosing section of it is where it gets hard. So do you want to grow your border and build that tile improvement on a farm tile instead, or do you want to grow that border and build a camp, or do you want to build a forest, a woodcutter there, or do you want to build, a mine there? That's going to be the decision there that changes how your city is going to grow versus the actual citizen management part of it. So no more early game citizen management. There are specialists And the specialists work just like how they did in previous games, where you assign a citizen to it and you gain extra yields depending on what that specialist is. I had mentioned it previously, but I'll talk about it now. There are now navigable rivers. This was something that I really liked playing around with. The idea that you could settle a city on a navigable river and then build a frigate inside that city and get that frigate to the ocean, because that navigable river is connected to the ocean, is probably one of the best changes that they could have made into this entire game. I'm really excited to be able to, get frigates, have them go around the world, go up a river, and then use those to help bombard a city. That's just a really, really good mechanic. I think everyone's going to agree. I think it works out really well. It's on tiles. It's not like a weird in-between tile situation where you don't know how it's going to work. It just works very well. When you watch it, you're like, oh. And then once you start playing it, it's like, oh, this works really well. That also includes, things that go through rivers, like trade boats and things along those lines. So navigable rivers, great addition. Another big thing, I guess, is towns. So maybe I should have mentioned this earlier, but the way that you settle now is very similar to other games such as Millennia and Humankind. When you settle a new city with a settler, it is turned into a town, and it is no longer a city immediately. It takes a few turns to develop before you actually start getting useful stuff from that town. And then once that town is settled, I think it was like 10 turns. It could have been less than that, but it was around 10 turns when I did one of them. It is an outpost now. I mean, it's still called a town, but it acts as an outpost. You have to either use gold, or I believe there was a different way that you could upgrade them into a city, whether it was like an ability or something along those lines. I think there is like a Civ that gets abilities to turn towns into cities like immediately. But regardless, if you don't want to turn it into a city, you can have a little outpost town that is set to focus to send things to your empire. You can set it to focus to gold, production, happiness, etc. The one caveat about that is once you set it to a focus, you cannot set it back to another one until the end of the age. So I have a feeling that might change. That might be a thing where it's set for like 15 turns, a specific amount of turns, then you can change it again. The entire age does kind of seem crazy. And then also, when you are settling cities, you now have a settlement cap. This is very similar to Humankind, where if you go over that settlement cap, meaning if you turn too many towns into actual cities, you will gain a negative modifier, which is like, negative production, happiness, etc. That is a very, very, very similar mechanic to almost all brand new 4X games. So if you've been playing other 4X games, that shouldn't be a surprise. It's pretty new. I don't hate it. I don't love it. I'm just kind of indifferent on it. So that's just a new mechanic. Resources are now a new micromanagement thing. Whenever you improve a luxury resource or a strategic resource or just like another resource on the ground like food, those can be managed now as they are actual physical little tile things that can be assigned to different cities. So for example, if I have a city and I improved 2 marble tiles that actually give marble as a luxury resource, those are now 2 physical little resource icons that pop up on the resource section that you can assign to different cities, kind of like citizens or kind of like policies, I guess. As what's a really good example? I guess in Civilization 6 you had the you had the monopolies and corporations part of the game, where whenever you built a corporation or an industry on a tile, it gave you, say you built a corporation on or an industry on turtles, it gave you 15% science to that city. Well, now those resources in Civ 7, each of them are different. Some of them give 15% culture, some of them give 5 happiness, some of them give 20% production or whatever. You can assign those specific resource items to cities, and those cities will gain those percentages. So if you have a city that is having a hard time growing and you made tile improvements of, I don't know what they are, but we'll just give rice as an example. If you made a tile improvement of rice and now you have rice as a resource, you can assign that resource to a different city, and that city will now gain the modifiers that resource gives. This was very useful when I was playing because I don't remember who declared war on me, but someone declared war. I believe it was Amina who declared war on me. I was going to war with her. I went back and took her city. That city had negative happiness modifiers because I was over my settlement limit. So I assigned resources to that city. I believe that gave like +1 happiness per resource assigned. And that helped with a bunch of other modifiers, helped me to get that city no longer unhappy. So it's nice. It's kind of, it takes away, well, I guess like because there's no more citizen management, it kind of allows you to do a little other micromanagement for those that, you know, may miss it. For example, like myself, I do love those micromanagement aspects of the game. And I think that's what separates the average Civ player to the people who play it at a high level. Other little tidbits, weather events and disasters are in the game from vanilla, so just like how those were added in Gathering Storm, those are just in the game. I had a hurricane come through and destroy the city that actually I just talked about in the previous section, the one that I took over from Amina. It came through, destroyed 4 tile improvements, and I think I lost like 6 population. So weather events and disasters are in the game from vanilla, and they're just there, whether it's floods, hurricanes, tornadoes, fires, they're just part of the game. Another little mechanic that is part of the game now are called tech masteries. You'll see here on the tech tree, there is a tech, and right below it, there is the mastery of that tech. Those masteries just give you kind of what Civics gave you in, or sorry, kind of what, I guess Civics, yeah, as gave you in Civilization 6 Forum. For example, you know, farms gave you 2 food, 1 production, or gave you 2 extra food, and once you unlocked feudalism, you gained extra food on farms. In Civ 6, it's kind of similar to that in Civ 7, but it's just by unlocking the mastery tech part of the game, whether it be, you know, writing. Like as you can see here, writing has a mastery underneath it, where you gained, you know, your library from writing, and then I don't remember what the actual mastery gave you. I don't remember if it was like +1 science per library or something along those lines, but it's in that vein. It's in that idea. That's just a new little mechanic. And then speaking of the tech tree and the culture tree, there is a specific culture tree that is part of your culture that gives you bonuses to that specific culture. So for example, in this game, and when I was playing as Hatshepsut of Egypt, there was the Egypt culture tree, and those unlock legacy things. Those like the arrival of Hapi, which is part of a culture tree, the scales of Anubis, and the light of Amun-Ra. The neat things about this is that, like I said, it gives you culture policies and abilities that are unique to that specific culture. And as for example, as I was talking about earlier with Egypt, I was using her ability to stack all of her modifiers for wonders because of the abilities that I got from her. Sorry, my words kind of went out there for a second. And it allowed me to build the pyramids very, very fast because her third ability, Light of Amun-Ra, allows you specifically as Egypt to build pyramids by unlocking this. There are some wonders later on that are like this. Carl confirmed this, where that specific culture gets to build that wonder. Like, for example, I believe Rome gets to build that, the Roman culture gets to build Colosseum by unlocking their third Egyptian culture civic, whereas the Colosseum is locked maybe down 10 to 15 techs in the Antiquity Civic. So if you're playing as Rome, you can build Colosseum super, super fast compared to other civs because of their culture civic tree, if that makes sense. It's a little complicated, but there are some extra abilities per culture that you can use that other cultures can't. So, you know, for example, one of them is building wonders faster than others because that wonder is specific to their culture. I guess that's the too long didn't read part of it. That's a new section. I thought it was cool. It worked pretty well when I played it. It was pretty seamless. So yeah, there you go. Now that I've gone over mostly new things in part of the games, I believe everything in there was new / changed. We're going to get into my opinion of the game. My opinion of Civilization 7. We're going to go into the good. We're going to get into the bad and the ugly. The bad isn't necessarily like, maybe I should call it the good, the unknown, and the ugly, because the unknown / the bad is going to be, I don't know how people are going to think about this. I don't know how I think about this. It's really hard to tell until we play the full game. So that's how I'm describing it. We have the good, the bad, and the ugly. This is the good. First things first, the game looks really good. The UI does not. We're going to get into that. But the game itself, the graphics are really good. The map looks really pretty. I really, really enjoy this diorama style art that they're going for, where it just, it's obviously diagonal down looking at it, and it looks like kind of a painting from, I don't know if it was like the 1800s, but those very big landscape paintings that you think of when you look at like Wild Wild West paintings, where it's people traversing to the west in the United States. I forget what those paintings are called, but that's what it reminds me of. The game looks really good. All of the wonders look really pretty. The leaders themselves, they look good. They don't look great, but overall they look good. That's the good part of the leader stuff. We'll get into the bad part later. But I do think that the game looks good. The really good, I had mentioned it before, the commanders, fantastic, incredible part of the game. The micromanagement aspect, I mean, I'm just going to literally repeat what I said before. The micromanagement aspect of the commanders is a fantastic change. It cuts out a lot of the unnecessary marching and micromanagement that you have to do, especially late game. I used to be a domination player, and now I mostly do culture, because once you get to the late game, having to micromanage like 40 units at the end of the game just gets really, really, really tiresome, especially in a turn-based game. So the commander is probably one of the best changes. It's fantastic. If there's any takeaway from this video about looking forward to playing Civ 7, it's playing with the commanders, because it just makes army movement and battles so much better, and way better than I thought it would have been. The city building aspect of the game was very good. I really, really enjoy the mini game of districting in Civilization 6. I find it to be very fun trying to figure out, how can I make large number go burr? How can I make this campus turn into a +6 campus that's going to give me 150 science later on in the game? You still get that aspect in Civilization 7. It is going to take a little bit of time figuring out the most optimal solutions of what buildings to build, where to build those buildings, how to make those adjacencies work with each other. But I feel like once we start mastering those, the game is going to get very, very fun, very, very fast. And we're going to see people just completely break the game and be like, look how many crazy broken yields I'm getting. I have a +9 science tile because I was able to, stack modifiers on it or whatever. But I really, really enjoyed the city building aspect. It is different. It's going to take a little bit to get used to, but I think once we do, people are going to really like it. While I hated the score system initially in Humankind, and they did change it to you can use those specific types of victories to finish the game, I do think that the legacy paths in Civilization 7 are going to be very good. I think it's going to make the game a little less linear, because most people just choose to end up winning a specific type of way anyways. For example, I almost always just end up going culture because it's the most fun. Whereas I do think the legacy paths are going to help take away the straight linearness of this game and make it a little bit more flexible. It is kind of hard to say. We only got to play through the first stage, so but based off of my experience and playthrough, I did enjoy just kind of clicking, be like, I want to play culture. Okay, here are your milestones that you have to hit to choose your culture side of winning the victory of the game. And you didn't have to. You could have done something else that just kind of gave you guidelines to be like, all right, if you want to win culture milestones, you have to build some wonders. You can still go and do domination aspects on top of it, but your main focus is going culture, and I did enjoy that. Whether it's going to change, maybe the section should be moved to the unknown, but I enjoyed it, so at least it was good from what I experienced. And above all, it may seem like this section is kind of short. I will say the game is very fun, though. This game is a fun game. I had fun basically through the entire section that I got to play through. I played through the entire age, and then I started over and got to play through maybe like 20 turns with a different civ. All of those mechanics that I have mentioned, for the most part, I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed Navigable Rivers. I really enjoyed, all the way that, even though it's completely different, I did enjoy how the tiles worked with building improvements on them. I know some people that we talked to did not like the fact that you didn't get a builder. I'll be honest, maybe if we got the builder for a specific period of time, because in the beginning I did find myself kind of breezing through the first 20 turns or so. Whereas, you know, in the beginning, I mean, to be fair, you didn't really get a builder in the first 20 turns in Civ generally, maybe like the first, like turn 30. So I think it's just the option, the idea of having that builder is what people didn't like. But I enjoyed being able to just put down the tile improvements, use buildings as a means to use buildings as city building. I did enjoy the city building aspect of the game. You know, I enjoyed the majority of the other mechanics of the game. Like, I've played a lot of Humankind, I've played a lot of Millennia, I've played a lot of grand strategy games in general, so I'm very familiar with narrative events. I enjoyed those. I don't know how other people are gonna think about it. I myself personally thought they were fine. You know, it definitely takes away from the RNG-ness. There is still some RNG, you know, whenever you picked up a tribal village in Civ 6, it was RNG based off what you got. Did you get a relic? Did you get gold? Did you get a free scout? Did you get a free builder? Whereas this now goes, all right, you have RNG, but now you have to choose between two of these things. Which one do you want immediately? Do you want production immediately? Do you want gold immediately? Do you want happiness immediately? Do you want science immediately? That'll finish your tech, you know. There is some choice there, and I think that is a good change. So also, like, I guess going back to what I was saying, the game itself is fun. It is a fun game. The biggest question that people are going to have, is it a Civ game? And that's what we're going to get into once we start talking about the ugly as well as the bad, or at least unknown. And the first big section that we're going to talk about with the unknown is the ages / leader Civ changes, I guess you would call it. I don't know how this is going to be received, and I don't know how it's going to play out. We did not get to the point where you switched over into the next age, you got to see what civs were available that you could change your leader into. So for example, if I played Hatshepsut of Egypt, once the age ends, I did not get to see if I could continue to be Hatshepsut of Egypt, or I changed to Hatshepsut of America, or Hatshepsut of Rome, or Hatshepsut of Mongolia, whomever I unlocked. I did not get to experience that, and I am a little concerned and a little wary on how the average player base is going to think about this. The one reason why I knock Humankind so much is, and what a lot of people do not get about Civilization as a franchise, is the human element of the game. People like familiarity. I constantly get comments all of the time on my videos, especially when it comes to Civ 7, people being like, I want to be able to change a Civic so I can play Abraham Lincoln of Rome during the modern era while he's wearing a Roman suit. And people say they want this, and then they go play games like Humankind, and everyone absolutely hates it. That is because the majority of people who play these games do not care about that aspect and just want to see the person they're familiar with. People love Civilization 6 because they see Gilgamesh and he looks like a big burly man, but he's your best friend. They don't care if it's some random avatar who has a name that you do not know, that you've never seen before, that has no place in history, being like, hi, I'm going to declare war on you. They don't care about that. They want familiarity. They want to know who that person is. I think, now this was confirmed by Carl, personally. He did personally confirm this, that the leaders themselves do not change. It's just the culture. That is what had happened in that is what has had happened in Humankind. But the problem with Humankind is that the eras changed so fast that they turned into different cultures, whereas like one culture you were fighting Herald of, we'll just say Norway, and then all of a sudden they turned into Herald of Germany, and you're like, why the hell am I fighting Germany right now? That's because I think in Humankind, the leaders were so nondescript that the culture itself took over who the leader was, and you had no idea, like you just didn't have any relatability to the leader. In Civ 7, I can see it working, I just don't know how people are gonna receive it. I think if you have a leader who has a big personality, they push forth their personality and make it known that you are playing versus this big personality, the changing the culture is not going to be that big of a deal, and you're just going to be doing it specifically for the bonuses that you get changing the cultures, whether it be, you know, once you move into the next age, you now gain a lot of science because you chose that culture, or this science is now military focused, or sorry, this culture is now military focused. So in the previous age, you were, Hatshepsut the peaceful, and in the next age, you're like, actually, I want to be a warmonger, so I'm going to change from Hatshepsut of Egypt to Hatshepsut of Mongolia, and because I have a lot of horses nearby, and so now I'm going to start building horses and using horse benefits. I can see that working. I don't know how the average player is going to think about it, because if I'm being honest, I do not think the average player cares. This is why I have this section in the unknown / the bad, because I cannot give you my full opinions on it, and I don't think anybody can until the game is released or until we get to that point. That is a big unknown. That was a big topic of conversation that we all of us content creators that were there and played the game and talked about it. This was a big topic of conversation on whether or not people are going to like it. I'm in the opinion that I think it will work. I'm like 70% that it's going to be okay. But there definitely were some people there that were on the other end of the spectrum and just felt like it was the antithesis of Civ, and I completely understand their point. So we'll see. Well, let me know what you guys think, because I mean, humankind does not do it well, and I think that kind of left a really bad taste in a lot of our mouths. So we'll see how it works out in Civ 7. The big onus for me is that it's civilization. It has a name for itself. We kind of can trust that it's going to make the best decisions. No, I'm not saying it always does. I'm not saying that Firaxis always makes the best decisions. But I definitely think that even if they make a bad decision, they can right the ship. So that is kind of why I'm a little bit more optimistic than I am pessimistic about this. The Crisis era, I don't know how people are going to react to this either. I personally liked it. I also didn't play with it enough to give like a full opinion. I know I said I thought it was a good change. I just don't know how people are going to react to it. Which I guess I can kind of tie into a lot of the other changes in this. Because the Crisis kind of does move into legacy paths as well as policy cards. All the policy type stuff too is kind of similar to how it was in previous games. There is so much combinations. There are so many possibilities of choice that I think it might be overwhelming to the average player. They took away a lot of things that make the game quote unquote hard and confusing for someone who's never played a Civ game before, and it's a lot easier to jump in. But once you get into the details and once you start playing, trust me on this, there are a lot of details that start popping up. You start changing your policy cards every 2 to 3 turns. You start having to pull out cards, put in new cards, adding new abilities, adding new attributes to your leader. There are a lot of really, really minute details that start happening that I think can be very, very confusing. And one of the things that we were told a lot throughout the game was there are infinite choices of possibilities that you can do when you play a Civ, that you can't really just say, well, this Civ's better than this one because of X, Y, and Z, because of the amount of choices that you get. And I think that might be a little overwhelming for new players, or at least casual players. It kind of goes back to the old adage that I have of when people complain about AI in Civilization. People are always like, I want good AI, I want better AI. And yes, the AI does kind of suck in some points, but people really don't want better AI, because when they get better AI, the AI is just going to constantly kick their ass over and over again, and they're not going to have fun. And I think the better way of saying it is they want smarter AI, or at least AI that isn't super linear and can adapt to things a little bit better. That's just a whole other scenario. I can't really get into that. Regardless, what I'm trying to say is that people think they want unlimited choices until they are given and presented with unlimited choices, and they get stun locked because there's 4 different things over here. And then each of those things that you choose from those 4 things have 8 different branches on them, and then each of those 8 branches on them have 16 branches onto them. And so now you're going from 4 to 8 to 16 to 32 on one singular branch. And so now you have 32 times 4, and then each of those 32, do you get what I mean? It starts to become very confusing and very overwhelming for the player, where I'll be honest, there are times during that gameplay I started to just click whatever looked good. I was like, that looks good, I'll choose that. That looks good, I'll choose that. And then I got to a point where I just stopped caring because there were so many choices available to me that all I cared about was like, well, I'm just going to build wonders, so I'm just going to choose the wonder button. Does this give me wonder abilities? Yes, I click it. Does this give me wonder abilities? No. Does it give me production? Okay, yes, I click it. And that, I think that's not a good thing. But it also could be I'm hyper overthinking it, and the average player is going to be fine with it, and I'm a jerk and think they're stupid. But that was kind of my takeaway of it, and that goes back to legacy paths, that goes back to crises, that goes back to leader attributes. I found the crisis fun, but I could also see the player being like, man, like there's a crisis happening. Why do I have to choose between -5 gold per turn for every single unit that I own, or minus 41 happiness to my empire? Like why? Like which one of these is better? Which one of these is worse? I can't think of the maths off the top of my head. Why can't I just have units coming at me and I defend the units? So that's kind of where I'm coming from. The possibility of choice might be overwhelming, and there just might be too many new things for the average player to kind of wrap their head around, that I could see it being bad. I could also see it being good and not a problem. So that's kind of another unknown for me. And now I'm moving into the ugly. In the first section, I talked about how I thought the art style was good, and I do think that the art direction is good of the map, the leaders, the actual overall art style is good. The UI is the opposite of that. It is very, very bad. We have been told that they are working on the UI, but I'm only going off of what I played with, as well as what you can see on screen here, and everything that I've interacted with. The UI is not great. This is also a complaint that has been for every single Civ since the dawn of time, but they're in a direction that I personally hate when almost every single modern new game does this, where they think minimalist is best, and it is not best. A really good example that's the opposite of this is Baldur's Gate. Baldur's Gate has so much text on screen, has so much color on screen. There's so many physical borders. There's so many spaces for things on the map, but you don't get overwhelmed. You can understand what's going on because things are delineated by color. They're delineated by numbers. You can look at them and understand what they're doing, and then when the text box of it pops up, it's not super duper tiny gray on gray on gray. And that is the biggest issue, that if there was a opposite of how we were talking about how great the commanders were in the game, the opposite of that would be how all of us hated the UI and they need to change it. I don't know what it is with the new modern games thinking that gray on gray is a good idea, because it is really, really bad. It makes things not stand out. There is contrast, but it's not in contrast in the way that you think it is. A really good example is the tech tree. So it mutes out everything around it, so it kind of does a small Gaussian blur with stuff in the background and makes it shadowed. And then it is a gray with a bluish hint screen with other the other texts themselves are also gray with different gradients of gray with a white text on it, and then different icons that are also gray. When I look at this, obviously when they are unlocked, it turns to that orange/gold color, and you can see the different vibrancies of color in each of the text. But when I look at this, I have no idea what I want to choose right off the top of the bat. If we compare this to a Civilization 6 tech tree, it is night and day, and I hate that, like I said, new games are doing this. When you look at the Civ 6 tech tree, like, yes, it is on a paper background, but it is very, very, very easy to figure out what things are on this. You look at this and you see, oh, blue, we know that blue is science. Blue campus, that is the campus icon right underneath writing. You see the animal husbandry, you see the icon of a horse. Oh, this has to do with horses. You scroll down a little bit, you see currency, you see the icon of a commercial hub, you see the icon of a harbor, you see the icon of a unit. Everything, even though they are roughly the same size, everything is very easy to figure out because of the contrast between the actual items themselves, the background, and everything around it. The color contrast works very well. The color palette is really good. This is not, even when things are lit up. And because it's gray on gray on gray, And on top of that, there is so much negative space. It makes everything look really small, really bad, and really amateur. It makes it look cheap. It makes it look like I'm not looking at a Civilization video game. Because why do I have agriculture all the way down here in this tiny little space, and there's so much empty negative space above the tech tree and below the tech tree? It's just bad. It's so bad. Additionally, on top of that, if you hover over the tech itself, so for example, we're hovering over currency here, the white text on this gray, slightly transparent background with these tiny little icons make it so hard to read everything that it gets to the point where I don't want to read it. I don't want to look at this and read it. And I go back to Baldur's Gate. Baldur's Gate has tons of text that you read, but everything is very easily digestible because of the color palettes that they use, because of the contrast between everything, and because of how they present everything, that it doesn't make it overwhelming. This makes it overwhelming, it makes it hard to read, and it makes me not want to hover over things and figure out what they are. That is probably my biggest complaint in this game, is that the UI is god-awful. Firaxis knows it. Firaxis knows that we feel this way. We have told them multiple times over and over again. We have been reassured that the UI is going to be changing. I hope so, and I hope that they're hearing what they're saying, because I'm not going to stop shouting it. It is very bad. It is very, very, very bad. Gray on gray is not the move. It makes everything super muted, and that kind of goes to everything in this game. And it's not just the tech trees. When you look at the policy cards, when you click on policy cards and you try to figure out like what policy you're going to be adding to your Civ, I gotta find it here. When you're trying to figure out what policy card you're going to be adding to your Civ, it's the same exact thing where you're like, okay, because it's gray on gray, you don't know what you are choosing. And another thing is all of the icons are so tiny. I just don't know what it is. It's like the icons are tiny. There's not enough contrast. Things aren't vibrant, and they don't push themselves forward from the gray background like they want it to. You can tell the idea behind it is that they want to have a neutral background with the colors and the items themselves pushing themselves in front of the gray background. But what ends up happening is it makes everything look really muddled and everything look the same. So if we have, for example, right here on this policy section, we have charismatic leader and tool making, +2 culture on the palace, +1 production and science on the palace. When I look at this, I don't immediately note that this is a science one and this is a culture one. Compare that to Civilization 6 policy cards, and you know exactly what type of policy card you are going to be assigning. You know that green is going to be for all of your wildcard slots. You know that red is generally going to be for military. You know that yellow is going to be for science and culture and economy. And so you know right off the bat that these are what these cards are going to give you. And there's, it just looks so much better. And I know that people are going to be like, oh, you're looking into the past. You're just trying to be nostalgic, rose-colored glasses. Not being rose-colored glasses, I feel like I'm just pointing out that this is a factual statement, that this looks better. It's easily identifiable versus this, which is kind of like, it just all looks the same. It just all looks the same. And that also goes into diplomacy as well. All of the diplomatic stuff when it comes to the text, when it comes to reading like the actual dialogue boxes itself, I had no idea. I'm not joking. I'm being very honest here. It took me 20 minutes to realize that this box of text down here at the bottom is supposed to be the subtitles of what Amina is saying to me. I thought it was just a placeholder text. I legitimately did not realize that this was supposed to be subtitles, and I think it comes down to one, it's the super light gold on gray background, so you don't really notice it in the first place. Two, everything is kind of shadowy and muddled anyways, so it's really hard to see. And three, I don't know if this is just placeholder font. It's like Arial with all caps. When I see that, it's like it just doesn't jump out to me, you know what I mean? And then also, like, once again, the first, like, you look at the first meet here, it's all gray on gray on gray. It just does not look good. The UI is bad. The UI is really, really bad, and that's going to tie me into a second part of this section that I am going to be labeling the leader, animation, and diplomacy section of the ugly. Now, don't get me wrong, I think the leaders themselves, for the most part, look good. There are just two things that like I said, this is all, please remember this is work in progress. The leaders themselves can change. A really good example is Teddy Roosevelt was very, very different from how he looked during the gameplay and trailer releases until the actual game was released. He was vastly different. So that is a possibility that happens here. But the first thing is I absolutely, and I made this known too, I absolutely loathe that the leaders are looking at each other side to side. I don't know whose decision it was to have the leaders face each other in this diplomatic thing, like it's a play, like I'm sitting in the audience of and this is a stage in front of me and I'm watching a play. I think that is a very, very bad decision, and I think it is antithetical to Civ, and I do not like it. Because Humankind is a really good example. I've already talked about how much I hate Humankind's diplomacy, because you're looking at it and you see two leaders in front of you, but what is missing out of this? It's you. In the beginning, when you're choosing the character and you're trying to figure out who you're going to play, they do their little animation. They talk to you. They're like, oh, I am Amina. I am talking to you, the person, the player of the game, and they're staring directly at you. When you look at Civilization 6 in the first time, you meet Cleopatra. She is looking at you. She is judging you. She is trying to seduce you. She is trying to figure out how she's going to use you. When you play Civilization 5 in the first time, you meet Montezuma. He's got fire all around him. He's looking at you. It's terrifying. When you are in Civilization 7, and the first time you meet a leader, it pops up. They're not looking at you. They're looking at an avatar next to you. And it does not invoke the same feeling as every single Civ game before this, because it is not directed at you, the player. It's directed at a third party that you are staring at, and there's no feeling there. I've talked about this before. One of the main things that a lot of new games get, that not a lot of new 4X games that miss, one of the main things that new 4X games miss is the player. They miss out on the human aspect of the game. They missed out on the relatability of the game, and I'm very, very afraid that Civilization 7 is going to miss out on this aspect just like previous games did. I, as a player, want to connect with the leaders that I am facing. The whole point of me playing Civilization is that I am a leader thrust into this era, or into this section where I am facing versus all of these different leaders. Yes, it is a top-down tabletop board game, but the way that Civ is presented is that I am a part of that game. I am not sitting above the game looking at all of these puppets. And I think that this is probably one of the biggest weaknesses of Civilization 7, is this weird sideways view into the interactions between the other AI and versus your avatar, which, to be honest, whenever you choose things, it is very lifeless. It doesn't invoke anything. There's no, I don't get, I hope that changes. I hope this is if they do keep it like this, that the avatars interact with each other. But I think the problem is because you are sitting there choosing, so they're both just staring at each other from a weird distance awkwardly, and it just looks so bad. Another thing too, sorry, it sounds like I'm being nitpicky, but, and I want to preface all of this, I said it in the beginning too, I enjoyed the game. I really liked the game, and I think the reason why I'm being really nitpicky is because I want this game to succeed so badly that I'm very passionate about these things that are bad, because I know that they're going to be detrimental to the game. And this is another good aspect to when tying it into the UI. We see the leader, but what do you notice about, I'm just going to show this image of us talking to Amita and meeting her for the first time as Hatshepsut. What do we see initially? The focus is not the leaders. The focus is the background. The focus is the background of the miniatures of the buildings. I'm watching this, and when I look at, when I'm watching this little cutscene happen, I am looking not at Amina staring at Hatshepsut. I am looking at the buildings and seeing little birds flying around. That should not be the focus of this dialogue. The focus should be Amina telling you that she is the taker of whatever and whomever she pleases. Not, I have tiny little buildings and a nice cute courtyard in the background. Additionally, she's standing in, the only inclination that you are talking to her and her culture is that there is a flag, a big old huge banner in the background that she's standing in front of. Same thing with you as Hatshepsut. Long gone are the... I mean, that's why everyone still talks about Civ 5, right? Everyone loves Civ 5 leaders and animations because, like I said, when you meet Montezuma for the first time, he's standing in front on top of his temple with these fire around him. When you talk to Nebuchadnezzar, he's sitting on his throne, you know, talking to voices because he has schizophrenia and knocking over his glass. You know, when you're talking to... When you're talking to the Songhai, that probably have the most like terrifying leader page of all time because he's standing in front of like a burning city, you are invoked with a feeling of this guy is probably going to kill me the first chance he gets. When you're looking at this in Civilization 7, there is no feeling there. There is no personality. Like even this little, like, yeah, the leader itself, it has cool animations. You see her, she's laughing, she's like looking at you, but there's still, it feels soulless. It looks like all the mechanics of it are there, all of like the structure is there, but it feels like it's empty. It feels like there's no soul and there's no communication between me and the character. And the same thing, it's just like, and then when all the other stuff pops up, it like there's both too much going on and nothing going on at the same time. And that is my biggest complaint outside of the UI is this right here. This this is really bad. I might be really alone on this and saying this, but if they don't change this to either make the the leaders bigger when they're they're the focus of what you're doing, the background is muted, if they don't change that to making it, I don't know, I get better is all I could say, or if having it to face you and not the weird random leader avatar version of yourself, which they can. You saw it in the beginning. You saw all the animations when you first meet the civilization. They do their meeting animation and they're staring at you, the player. They should just keep it like that. I am going to go on and say this. I think that will be, and it sounds really silly and it sounds like a very minor detail, I think that is going to be one of the biggest downfalls for Civilization 7 if they don't change this. I am pretty amenable on a lot of the other things. UI stuff I can get used to, but this leader part of the game needs to change. There needs to be either more action between the two leaders themselves. They need to change the backgrounds. They need to make it where the leaders are the focus. They need to change it to how it just used to be, where you're talking to the leader one-on-one, not watching a side view of it. That has to change. I don't think Civ 7 is going to fail. I think it's still going to be a good game, but I think one of the biggest reasons why Civilization 6 is one of their best-selling franchise of all time is because it's so personable. And this is not personable. This is soulless, and it does not feel good to watch. Another thing that I think is not good, and I definitely think needs to change, at least when it comes to diplomacy, I think players are going to hate influence. Influence is not a new type of currency. It is in almost every single grand strategy game. You need to have different types of whatever currency it is to declare war on different factions in whatever grand strategy game you're playing. You have to have a specific type of currency in order to do different actions with other playable characters in grand strategy games. This isn't a grand strategy game. This is a 4X game. And I think having this influence, having a currency be there to be like, hey, maybe we should have open borders between each other. Here is some extra currency to be able to even initiate that. I can understand if you ask them for it and they say no because they don't like you well enough. That makes sense. But to have a currency to be there, to even be able to ask them in the first place, I think is a bad choice. I think it's bad for both people have played this game before, but I also think it's going to be bad for people who play this game the first time, because they're going to be trying to do some diplomacy with the AI, and they're going to look at it and they're going to be like, why can't I click this button? Like, I want to be able to trade with this Civ. Why can't I? And obviously you can sit there and be like, well, you haven't garnered enough influence because you're not a big enough, power on the map and all that type of stuff. The average player is not going to care. The average player is going to be like, I want to talk to this player and I want to be able to denounce them. Oh, sorry, you weren't able to get enough currency to do that, Like, you can't just, like, immediately give... Like, you have to spend currency to give them a hostile greeting the first time you meet them, right? It's not a lot of currency, but maybe you meet someone... Maybe you expended all of your influence on trying to get a city-state, and you meet someone the first time, and you just want to be a silly warmonger and denounce them immediately. You can't, because you don't have enough influence currency. I don't think that's going to be a good change. I think that the average player is not going to like that. I think that is going to be something that is probably going to get changed. I'm sure influence will probably be... It's very useful for city-states or independent powers, don't get me wrong. I think that's a great change in that aspect. But when it comes to actually using and spending your influence on other AI, it felt very clunky. It felt bad. It felt like I don't know, it just didn't feel good when I was playing it. Like, it felt weird to be like, I have to spend currency to be like, all right, let's trade some things now. I mean, why can't I just go into them and just trade automatically, I don't know. I felt that was I felt like that was like a couple steps backwards for Civ. I don't think it's a good change. All right. That last section, let's take a breath. Everyone take a breath. This is Civ 7 we're still talking about, and this is alpha. This could just be because it is the only, like, all we saw was a vertical slice of the game. There is so much more to this game that maybe those negatives aren't as impactful when you play the full game. We don't know. I'm only going off of what I was able to experience when I was at Firaxis Studios, as well as the extra information that they've given us since that point, which is, I'll be honest, it's roughly the same as what we experienced at the studio itself. This is still a Civ game in general. It's still a fun game. I had fun when I played it, even though it was only about 2 hours or so. That's what I want to make this whole video. Like, if there was a synopsis on this, the game is still very fun. I have a feeling the way that people are going to treat this game is going to be kind of how people treated Civ 5 when it came out after Civ 4. The reception to Civ 5, right when it came out as Civ 4, was very, very bad. I mean, there are still Civ 4 purists to this day, but eventually, people look back at Civ and think Civ 5... To this day, people look back at Civ 5, specifically with Brave New World, and think it's probably the best Civ game out of all of the Civ games. And I have a feeling that this can match up to that potential. There's just a lot of work to do. Once again, please remember, this is just early gameplay footage. A lot can change between now and release. I will say the release date, we'll see if it can be, done. I'm gonna be very stereotypical here. This has it has all the good bones of a good game. I mean, it really does, though. It has the mechanics are good. The gameplay itself is good. It just feels like the Civ soul itself, and you can't really quantify that, can you? It feels like the soul of Civilization is what's missing. And I don't know if it's because we only played that 2-hour snippet and we don't have the full game, because we only saw, 4 civs that were available instead of the possible, I mean, I'm assuming, I don't know yet, but I'm assuming it's probably going to be around 19 or 20 leaders that are released in vanilla, based off of previous estimations. That was one thing we weren't told. I don't know if it's a combination of those things, but that is my main takeaway and concern, is that the game is good. There are all of the elements there that are going to allow it to be a good game. It just feels like the soul of Civilization 7 is missing, and maybe they can figure that out between now and then. Maybe it is already there and we just haven't seen it yet based off of our little interaction that we had with it. But that's kind of how I feel about Civilization 7. That was a whole lot of video recapping my experience with the game. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm still very, like, don't get me wrong, I'm still very excited about Civilization 7. I'm gonna play the hell out of this game. I know I'm still gonna enjoy it because I enjoyed playing the demo. But there's a lot to go over, and there is a lot to unlearn from old Civ games and learn with new Civ stuff. So, yeah, I think that's all I've got to say about this game. I'm really excited. I hope you guys are all excited too. Please let me know what you guys think about all the new changes in the game. Whether you hate them, whether you like them, if there's anything you agree with me on, you know, if you agree with me like the UI type stuff, if you agree with me on the leader stuff, or if you disagree and actually you really like the transparent UI stuff, please let me know in the comments below. This is going to be a very divisive video. I think Civ 7 is going to be very divisive, and I'm very interested to see how it looks upon release. I think that's going to do it for me here. Once again, thank you all for watching. Once again, a big thank you to Firaxis and 2K for hosting me for this event, and yeah, I'm really excited to start making Civ 7 stuff soon. Anyways, that's gonna be it for me. Thank you all, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.